Yes, 2 minutes ahead of time, but we have a host MEP on a very, very tight schedule. So if you don't mind, and as you were all extremely diligent to pass security in a super efficient way, I was probably saying it's a premiere in our history of organizing meetings in the Parliament. So thank you everyone and well done. And it's a pleasure to introduce our host of today, MEP Romana Jerkovic. So Romana, please, over to you for the words of introduction.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody, dear colleagues and dear brain health researchers, clinicians, and advocates. It's my real pleasure to welcome you here in the European Parliament for this important brain research summit. I would like to thank the European Brain Council for strong commitment to promoting a shared European agenda on brain health and research. It is indeed a privilege to host this event together, and I would like also to excuse myself as I will not be able to stay a long time because I have some committee and it started at 9 as well, and I have to rush there, and maybe I will be back if we finish earlier. Yes, I am a politician, but first and foremost, I'm a scientist. And as you might expect, science is very important to me. And when science involves, we involve with it. It is the basis of our progress and also the catalyst of the changes. But today, especially in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, science finds itself under a huge pressure. That is why now, more than ever, we must prioritize investment in scientific research. There is indeed an urgent need to strengthen the ability of Europe's researchers to innovate, to collaborate and drive forward the progress in the neuroscience. And many of you are aware that the EU for Health budget suffered a substantial reduction this year. And this was a difficult moment, one that I still find very hard to accept. However, I take some comfort in the fact that the European Parliament successfully pushed back against plans to cut 400 million from Horizon Europe in 2025. And that is victory worth of recognizing. We all understand a very simple truth. There is no health without brain health. The brain is not just another organ. It is who we are. It is our thoughts, our memories, our fears and hopes, our capacity to love, to reason and create. And it is the core of what makes us human. And yet, too often, brain health slips out of our focus. And I don't want to share facts and numbers today, as you well know them very well, and probably much better than me. But I do want to share my concern with the fact that despite the enormous burden that brain disorders place on individuals, and not only on individuals, but also on their families and health system in general, society, brain research still struggles for visibility, for funding, and also for prioritization. And now I understand the need to invest, in security, in defense, but this must come at the expense of the public health. And security is not just about armies and borders. It's about people's ability to live healthy lives. And without well-founded and robust health systems, our ability to respond to crises, military or others, will be fundamentally weakened. And after all, who will defend Europe if our population is unwell? So, but there have been also some good news. Just earlier this year, the European Medicine Agency, as you perfectly know, approved the first disease-modifying treatment for Alzheimer's disease, and it was a truly historic moment. For decades, we have only treated its symptoms, and now for the first time, we have a treatment that can slow the progression of this disease. But of course, there is so much yet to be done. I hope that we will soon have a dedicated European partnership for brain health, not just a line in the work program, but a real a structural and long-term initiative backed by political will and a dedicated budget. A partnership that supports interdisciplinary collaboration, that address ethical and regulatory challenges, that support translational research, and what is also very important, that puts patients in the center of our healthcare systems. And there are also some important legislative and strategic files on the table. The future of EU research policy will be shaped by discussion on the next framework program for research and innovation, the European research area policy agenda and life sciences strategy. And yes, these instruments can help to all of us move away from fragmented efforts and towards a more sustainable, inclusive, and mission-driven research ecosystem. We just need political, I mean, it's not just, it's much, but yeah, we do need strong political will that will back up all these initiatives. So let's use today's summit, not just to reflect, but to act, to commit to a European Union that does not just respond to crisis, what we often do, but build a healthier, smarter, and more compassionate future. And I will continue to fight inside the European Parliament for that vision. It is my duty, it is my responsibility, and that's why I'm here. And I see this summit about a kind of Europe that I want to live in. And I want to live in the Europe that puts healthy brains in the place where it deserves. Thank you so much. I wish you a successful work today.
Thank you very much, Romana. And we obviously forgive you as you have a very important mission, but also because the SAN committee is voting on important text, the own initiative reports for mental health strategy, a neurological disorder strategy. So it's extremely important for our community. Yes. So yes, we trust that you are going to convey that message also down there. So we leave your space available if you are able to come back, but no worries, and we will carry on.
Thank you so much. I will try to be.
Thank you. And Kasia, it's a pleasure to have you on behalf of the Commission and the DG Research. So you are the head of unit for the unit combating diseases. Mm-hmm. So firsthand dealing with brain research and our ecosystem here around the room. You will be intervening later on in the program, but we also wanted really to invite you to have introductory words on behalf of the Commission. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the European Brain Council, to MEP Kovic for hosting this event. And it's really my pleasure to be here with you. EBC keeps the spotlight on brain research, on brain innovation, and I think it's very important. And we are also meeting at a very crucial time, right? You were saying that's a call for action. I would like to say a lot has been done. You're calling for investment. I'd like to say there has been 7 billion investment in brain and mental health research since 2014. But of course, and several policy documents that frame our work. From strategies on non-communicable diseases, such as Better Together, mental health communication, also the long-term care strategy that tackles a little bit the societal aspects and the societal impact of neurological and mental health chronic disorders. But at this point of time, I think we are also our lens is changing, the zoom and the context, the policy context is changing. So we very much come from the policy documents that I just recall are very much from the health, from social care. And the narrative now, as we have discussed in other meetings, it's very much on the competitiveness and the benefit and the potential that is within Europe's life science, biotech, and research and innovation industry more broadly. So thank you for putting together today's event, and a very diverse mix of speakers who can speak not only to the funding that goes from the Commission, our kind of main tools that work, the cluster for health, but many of you are involved in projects from IHI, the Innovative Health Initiative, from IT Health, from also ERC. And I think when we speak about this ecosystem and what can we do together, we really have to think about bringing all these tools together under this new banner of what can life sciences bring to the society, to individuals, their families, but also how we can harness their potential for Europe's economic development. So I'll stop here and I'll come back to all these exciting points about the new MFF life science strategy, about which I cannot say anything in the last panel, but I'll leave it for that. And I'm very happy that we have Frederica here who will say more about the Brain Health Partnership, which for us is the instrument that will solidify and bring forward that investment and that crucial connections that the partnership has to make with all of you around the table. So that's it.
Thank you, Kasia, and well teased for everything we will not be able to. And next, for closing this panel of introductory remarks and welcoming words, our president of EBC, Professor Suzanne Dixon, flying over from Göteborg and being here with us this morning. Suzanne, over to you.
Thanks. So, dear members of Parliament and dear colleagues and friends, thank you for coming. It's going to be a really fantastic day. I'm sure we're very thankful to MEP Jarkovic for her really unwavering support and for setting the tone of the crucial discussions that we'll have today. Thank you, Kaisa, also for highlighting the ongoing policy momentum. It's truly heartening to see at the level of commitment, both at the level of the European Parliament and at the level of the Commission. So as President of the European Brain Council, I'm really deeply encouraged by the recognition that brain research that's really very long been under-prioritised must now move to the centre of Europe's health, science and innovation agendas. Because while the challenges have been laid out clearly, we're here today to talk about not so much about problems and challenges, but about the solutions. And more importantly, to ensure that those solutions are translated into action, as we heard from our MEP. At EBC, we represent a very unique community. We bring together researchers, many who are here today, clinicians also, patients, industry and scientific societies across the entire spectrum of brain disorders, neurological and mental alike. And our message is really quite a simple one. Europe has the knowledge, the talent and the collaborative spirit to lead the world in neuroscience. But we need the right environment to do so. This means creating the right conditions for brain research to thrive. And on this, I have 3 points. We need to reduce fragmentation. We need to secure long-term predictable investment. And we need to ensure that collaborative excellence is not hindered by bureaucracy or us working in silos. But let me be clear, it's not only about research that we're here today, it's about what this research makes possible. So we're thinking early diagnosis, targeted treatments, personalised care, and ultimately better lives for the millions of people living with a brain condition across Europe. The statistics there are continually worrisome, and it's estimated that 1 in 3 people are living with a brain condition in Europe. Yet we know that no single initiative, no matter how ambitious, can do this alone. What we need is coherence. coherence across programmes, coherence across countries, and a genuine EU-level coordination effort to ensure that brain research benefits from all relevant policies. We've mentioned some of those today: health, digital, social, industrial, and beyond. So today we hope to turn these shared goals into a shared call for action. Because if we want to reduce the burden of brain disorders, we need to recognise that brain research not only has a priority, but it has a strategic investment for the future of the European Union. So again, thanks for being here, and I'm really looking forward to today, and let's stand together to make this future a reality. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Suzanne. So we know, let's say, can enter into the real content of our meeting today. We have apparently a hard stop, as this room will be busy with another meeting at 11. So I will ask speakers to stick to time and to stick to their briefing. And I'll use my privilege as moderator to interrupt in order to make sure that we are not kicked out physically of this room. The content, as you will have seen on the program, is made up of different panels, fireside chats. We have only one speaker joining us online, but otherwise you have all the panelists present here. You can easily identify them as they have a name tag. And feel free also to make sure that if we cannot address a question that you have, you walk up to them at the end of the meeting, as we will for sure try and gather in one of the agoras here, or even go downstairs for a coffee if possible. So our first fireside will be with Friederike Batter. Friederike, you're the head of the coordination of what is called the Coordination and Support Action Brain Health. But that's the, as I'm sure you'll say in a moment, the preparatory work for the Partnership for Brain Health. That was already mentioned, that we are all getting excited about. But can you tell us first and foremost why such a partnership is needed?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Fred, for having me today and giving me the possibility to introduce to all of you the future European Partnership for Brain Health that we are currently preparing in the framework of this coordinating and supporting action. We are envisaging to start this new partnership in January 26, so we are really as a and preparation phase right now. It has been already mentioned by my foregoing speakers that indeed brain disorders are one of the main causes of mortality and disability in Europe and beyond. Almost everyone is affected either personally or by a member of family or friend. And indeed, more than 40%, recent numbers show that more than 30% of the world's population are suffering from a condition that is affecting the nervous system. And particularly worrying is also the rise in mental health, especially in the younger population. And indeed, the current crisis that we face, environmental crisis, geopolitical crisis, and the current rise of economic pressure in many countries in Europe and beyond, are of course further aggravating that situation, especially for the most vulnerable population. And there have been progresses in the last years, already mentioned, but still we are lacking effective strategies for the prevention of brain-related disorders and also options for therapy and care of these disorders. And brain-related disorders always include neurological disorders and mental disorders alike. So maintaining brain health and coping with the burdens that are caused by these diseases are paramount, obviously, for all societies in Europe and beyond. But given the scale of the problem, no single country is able to tackle this global challenge on its own. So what we need is a sustainable and holistic approach, such as future partnership for brain health. So what we really need is to increase regional and national investments and coordinate these investments in a better way to foster impact generating research and innovation, and to bring all relevant actors to the table, as we are doing also today. And indeed, the EU, Kasia already mentioned that, has already done a lot, and also the member states in the last couple of years. There have been big initiatives aiming to structure and align brain health research and innovation, and that includes neurons, JPND, the Human Brain Project, also the infrastructure that is implemented by eBrains. And most of these initiatives have already ended or will come to an end in the near future.
Okay, but I guess everyone here, or almost everyone, is familiar with all of these initiatives. So now the partnership is a new thing, is a new kid on the block. What is it exactly, and what is it trying to achieve, or what are its objectives in it?
So the future partnership is aiming to fill this gap by bringing together all these initiatives under one umbrella, by capitalizing on the established structures, but also to further develop the brain health ecosystem in a more holistic way. That means taking stock of all dimensions of brain health and overcoming the indication-related silos that have been often present in the past. So what is the partnership? Or what is this going to be? It is a network that is gathering more than 50 partners from 31 countries within and outside Europe. And it aims to enhance the understanding of the brain in all its dimensions, and also to foster, and that's the competitiveness aspect here, to foster the translation of the research results into tailored and accessible solutions for prevention, for early diagnosis, treatment, and care. And that creates real tangible impact for societies. And for that, we, as I already said, we gathered more than 50 partners. The partners are primarily national and regional funding organizations from member states, European member states, from European associated countries, and also from third countries that are contributing financially to the further future activities of this partnership.
Okay, financial contribution, is there a way, or can you already disclose what it's going to be? Because everyone is eager to know before, of course.
Yes, indeed, I can. Since we have just very recently submitted our proposal to the European Commission for this partnership, everyone indicates the financial commitment that they're going to spend on this partnership. And the national and regional investments are summing up to 350 million euro. And that's 70% of the overall budget that the partnership is going to have. So the overall budget is around 500 million, half a billion euros in the 10 years of the runtime. And the residual 30% from this total amount comes from the European Commission, which is 150 million.
So now we've got that money made available and committed. So the other question is like, how are we going to spend it? And how is the community and of which we have representatives on the table today? How are the future goals and priorities going to be designed? When is that going to be made available? And what will be the process then?
So first of all, as you already mentioned, the implementation of transnational codes is indeed the main action of the future partnership. We are envisaging more than 20 transnational calls during the runtime of the partnership. I will tell you more about how it is set up. But it's also important to say that apart from calls, there are also other activities that we are implementing in the framework of this partnership, which is, and that has been also mentioned, which is aiming to support the generation of an environment that fosters innovation and translation of and that includes bridging with private sector representatives, with healthcare professionals, obviously the involvement of patients. So we will have a patient advisory board on our decision-making body. There will be also activities for the inclusion of society and citizens to foster real multidisciplinary research, to foster data harmonization and methods standardization, and the better use of available infrastructure in the field, as well as the support of next generation of researchers in the brain health field. So this is, there are also other activities like the fostering of international cooperation and things, but I just wanted to point out there are many other activities than only calls, but obviously calls are a main aspect of our partnership. So as already mentioned, we will implement more than 20 international calls that's envisaged for the future partnership, and that includes different formats. We have the classical calls that everybody in research field already knows from the neuron and JPD field, and we are envisaging 14 of them. Focus with biomedical focus, but also multidisciplinary approaches. Then we will have calls that are more focusing on ethical, legal, and societal aspects of brain research. We are also doing new call formats in the field, and like more industry-related calls, high-risk kind of calls. So there are different call formats. Some of them still need to be developed during the time of the partnership that we are visiting. And the process, which is what you have asked, all of these calls, or everything, all the activities that we are doing within the partnership are actually based on the strategic research and innovation agenda. And this document is a kind of reference document that is being offered to the national funding partners of the partnership, so they can pick those priorities that are important for them. So the SRIA really delineates the strategic priorities and the main line of action for the future partnership. It has been generated in the frame of the CSA, already published last year, in close consultation with the future funders, with the European Commission, with patients, the research community, obviously, and other important stakeholders. So, and when a new call is being planned, the members of the scientific advisory board are being consulted to generate a short list of topics that are especially relevant for this specific format, as I said. And then this list is offered to the funding partners who can pick according to their national priorities. So that is really the basis of the action and the funding that we are getting for these calls. Of course, we will aim for alignment as much as we can. And once the call topic is decided, there will be dedicated meetings, call it foresight symposia, where we invite ad hoc experts, member of the strategic advisory board, also the patient advisory board, to discuss the knowledge gaps and priorities tackled in this field. And based on this discussion, the call text is then being developed by the funding partners.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for sharing all of these pieces of information with us. We understand that a lot is in the making, so we'll take advantage of our collaboration with the future partnership to invite you to further events and then maybe update us all on those developments. So any one of you having questions for Federica, hold it up for the end of the meeting, as we need to move on to the next session. As I said, as we are on a tight schedule, unfortunately, but put it down on paper and walk up to her. She committed to stay around. And we know where to find her. She's not far in Bonn. And thank you very much, Federica.
Thank you.
I'd like now to move on to the next panel on ethical and regulatory challenges in research. And first, introducing our speakers for this panel, we have with us Sabine Holter-Koch from the ECNP Preclinical Data Forum Network. Sabine, good morning. We have Kirk Leach, the Executive Director of the European Animal Research Association. We also have Hervé Schneiweis, who who is the director of the Neuroscience Paris Seine IDPS laboratory. And online we have Alice Accoroni, who is a representative on the board of the European Academy of Neurology on behalf of the Residents Federation in Neurology. Alice, I don't know if you can hear us okay, and if you are with us. Yeah, she should be there. Okay. Well, let me know when she connects. Okay, I wanted to start with her, but obviously we can maybe try with others. So Sabina, I'll start with you then. So we have asked every one of you for, let's say, 2 minutes of introduction about like what you see as ethical and regulatory challenges in your day-to-day work. And maybe you can tell us very briefly about what it entails in your day-to-day life. And then we can craft the discussion. And we are also planning to take questions from the audience. So if you have any, just give me a sign when we open the conversation. Sabine, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Good morning, everybody. So I assume you're all aware of the fact that in the European Union already for a long time, it's the case that we're only allowed to use animals in research if no alternative method is existing to answer a specific scientific question. And if animals have to be used, then the 3 Rs have to be applied: replacement, reduction, and refinement. And I would say the European Union animal welfare and animal care have a very high value, and we're working under very high standards. But nevertheless, there is continued pressure on the animal research community to focus on the first R, replacement. To ideally replace the use of animals completely. And this really poses a problem because not every research question can be addressed by using, for example, human-derived cell lines or human-derived organoids. For example, the effect of genetic mutations on brain development or behavior cannot be studied. The effect of therapeutic interventions or dietary interventions or any effect of diets that, for example, fathers consume shortly before conception that might have an effect on the offspring, the metabolic conditions of the offspring where there's evidence that there is an influence cannot be studied in an organoid. And this is why I think it's a real challenge for the animal research community to fight for continued support, to make a science-based decision on what model systems are appropriate to address a specific scientific question. And I think we need support here.
Okay, thank you, Sabine. And obviously, Kirk, maybe we can follow up with you.
Yes, so I run a global communications and advocacy organization. Thank you for inviting me. I think, brain research raises particular specific ethical and moral questions, which is the centrality of animal models to brain research. And I think we face 2 connected problems. One is, I think, the exaggerated view that the public in the EU wants to end animal research. If you look at the recent European Citizens Initiative, which has led to the phase out of animals in chemical testing, 1 million people put their names to a signature. And I must have been to 100 meetings over the past year where people from the Commission or MEPs or the people have said, the European public have spoken. From my mathematics, there are 450 million people in the EU. The idea that 1 million people can drive policy, I think, is a fatal mistake. If you look at the ECI, which is about phasing out animals in research, there are 3 aspects to it, and the final one is modernized science in the EU. And the argument is that those who use animals in research are stuck in the past, using old dated forms of technology, and are conservative and won't raise their vision to a new world of science. And that's a difficult position for the scientific community, including the new science community, to be in. So my second issue, my second connecting thing is that the research community needs to make a stronger moral and ethical case for the use of animals in research. In the last EU figures, 90% of animals used in research in the EU were mice, rodents, and zebrafish. if you listen to commentary, you think that all animals used in research are either dogs or non-human primates. Non-human primate use, which is central to neuroscience, was 0.23% of all animals used in research. So that again, 0.23% of all animals used in research. Put a different way, if you think about Wembley Stadium, the home of football, that was you all know, that 90,000 people can fit into Wembley Stadium.
According to whom?
According to me.
We should have a debate on that.
Okay, 90,000 people can fit into Wembley Stadium. If you think about that in terms of animals, 202 seats would be filled by primates. That gives you a visual example, yet primate use is central to neuroscience. So the research community needs to make a stronger ethical case, because if the politicians hear that animal research is torture, that the benefits of animals don't come to humans, if animal research is outdated technology, they're not going to fund brain health research.
As we are waiting to check if Alice join us, and maybe we can take the conversation in two segments here. I'll probably ask you the question already, maybe to expand a bit on how both of you saw the evolution of the situation over the last few years. Would you see a trend, in terms of like worsening your context of like conducting research, Sabine? Yeah, and I'll turn to Kirk after.
Definitely. I really have the feeling that the previous ECI that you mentioned, and probably also all the efforts before that, have been very effective in raising the bureaucratic workload for being able to get an approval to be allowed to conduct animal research. Depending on the country, it can take between 6 months and a year to get the approval. And that doesn't help with competitiveness, because that slows down the whole scientific process. And it's also not a good message for the next generation of researchers, which usually are on very short time schedules to finish their PhDs and also postdocs, and depend on, this as a prerequisite to be allowed to conduct their research. And if, we need to have the next generation trained in this very important technologies. Otherwise, we lose the competence.
Good.
I think one of the problems I would see is that the research community has been far too defensive about dealing with public or political pressure. And the kind of default position from universities and companies has been to avoid this ethical issue, to let it go away, in the belief that somehow, if you don't make a strong ethical, scientific, moral case for animal research, then that's going to placate those who are against animal research. And clearly, it just doesn't work. ERA carries out a regular survey of institutions in Europe that use animals for research. We do a kind of a survey to the Commission. And many modern European institutions that are funded by the public, funded by taxpayers' money, consciously avoid on their websites having any mention of that they fund animal research or animal research takes place there. And as I said, that creates this kind of one-sided negative narrative, because the public hears in this year that animal research is torture and the benefits of animal research don't come to humans. And this year they don't hear anything. Nobody's saying here that animal research is the golden bullet for everything. But unless we provide a balanced narrative, then the public and the politicians are going to go with what they hear. So it's incumbent on all of us to be much more robust in making that strong ethical moral case for why animals are used in research.
And what is the role that you see scientists should play in this type of debate? And I mean, you were also mentioning like the need to engage with policymakers.
Yeah, but I hate to say it, the public don't believe me. And they don't believe PETA or the Europe for Animals. If you look at any kind of opinion poll, the trust that people tend to have on this issue is with publicly funded researchers. That's where it lies. And so therefore, I think there's an incentive and a benefit for the research community to so example would be, in a number of countries, ERA's created this patient discovery project, where we take in patient groups, their carers and patients into research institutions that are doing research looking at their particular disease areas. So in the Netherlands, an ERA member has brought in patients suffering from Parkinson's disease. They're shown around the facility. They understand why animals are used in this area, where new approach methodologies may reduce the need for animals. So they see it, but part of that is that ERA then gives them communications advice to not just to be more proactive in their country about the use of animals in research. And it's the first time, I think, where researchers and patients can actually meet each other. And I think it's a very important project, and we want to expand it across Europe.
So Sabina, you have last one?
Yeah, just on this, I'm also a member of the German Center of Mental Health, where the involvement of patients in the decisions on what projects are being taken forward is really taken to the next level. And I would completely support that. This is a very good initiative also to bridge the gap from people like me, fundamental researchers, to the patients. It forces us to explain in detail, very simply, what we can actually do to help the patients. And it also helps us to understand what really the concerns of the patients are, and to rethink also how we go about addressing our scientific questions. So I think this is really a very important movement.
Thank you. Alice, can I check if you hear us okay?
Yes, yes, I can hear you properly. Can you hear me and see me properly?
Can you try this again?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me properly?
No, we cannot hear you.
Yeah. Should I try again?
Yeah, no, it's working now. Perfect.
Perfect.
So
thank you so much. Sorry for the technical issues, and thank you for really making the online participation possible. I would have liked to be there with you, but there were some issues with the organization of the clinic, so I couldn't join you in person. But thank you so much for the invitation and for organizing this timely meeting and symposium.
no worries, with pleasure, and thanks for making it. Maybe I can invite you to provide a few thoughts on the ethical regulatory challenges that you see for brain research, but also maybe also for your clinical practice.
Absolutely. So here I represent, as you mentioned, the young section, so the residents and research fellow section of the European Academy of Neurology, and in general, the European Academy of Neurology. I think there are many challenges that we're facing, and this is why it's also a very exciting time to be in the brain area and the brain health research area. One of the topics that I'm really passionate about, and that I think will be one of the challenges that we need to face as a community, is the protection of neuroprivacy and neuro rights in the era where we have multi or pan-omics and brain-machine interfaces. So we know that from the research, but also from the clinical point of view, more and more we use high-density recording. So that means whole brain MRI, intracranial EEG, multi-omics data, and we know that these data really reveal quite intimate aspects of cognition, mental health, genetic risk or risk for some neurodegenerative conditions, and even consumer preferences. So these are what were defined like the neuro rights, which are not yet identified, for example, in the GDPR as personal and sensitive data. And in parallel, we know that brain-machine interfaces, they can read, but they can also write neural signals and somehow introduce novel challenges in terms of modifying cognitive function, and also potentially including subliminal advertising, covert surveillance. So these are aspects that, as I mentioned, are related to different extent to the concept of neuro rights. And I think that there is still a gap in terms of current binding EU regulation when it comes to neuro rights. And it's something that I think we need to discuss all together as a community, also taking into account the societal values that are now evolving. Then I think there are also questions with regard to challenges with regard to equity. When it comes to big data, as I mentioned, we are working now in research and in clinical practice with omics, panomics, multi-omics, so very large data. And we also know from the scientific point of view that most of these large data sets, they're often dominated by Western, educated, industrialized, and rich populations. So that leaves out a large part of populations, minorities that are not adequately represented in research. And this will mean when we are going into large data sets that we're building algorithms, AI algorithms that do not take into account this population. So they can be definitely biased in terms of even then informing policymakers in terms of what are the best measures to promote brain health or to reduce the burden of different conditions. We also know that there are ethical challenges coming from neuroenhancement. Neuroenhancement is a fascinating area, especially for me. I work in dementia, and the idea of promoting really healthy aging and cognitive development will definitely, in my opinion, revolutionize completely our field. However, there are also challenges related to the possibility that this enhancement could be just limited and restricted to specific population and leave out some of the generally minorities that are not represented. And then as it was mentioned initially, I think one of the regulatory main challenges is the regulatory fragmentation. So we know in research that some projects, some specific studies can be very easily approved in specific states, member states, and in others there are still some limitations on slowing down, and that means also inequities in terms of accessibility to new technologies and important studies that could lead to a reduced burden of neurological or in general brain disorders and promotion of brain health. There are many other challenges. Some of these have already been mentioned by the previous speakers, but I think these are the areas that really are interesting also from the perspective of the AN and of young researcher and residents.
Thank you very much, Alice. And maybe Hervé, we can maybe invite you to take the floor, and I'm certain that some of the issues that were mentioned already would also be fields of interest of yours.
Yes, certainly. For those who don't know me, I'm obviously a neurologist at La Salpêtrière in Paris and a neuroscientist, but most likely I'm here today for the work I promoted at OECD and at UNESCO, and more recently with the European Charter for Responsible Innovation in the field of neurotechnology. So I will not repeat what was said wonderfully by Alice. I would just focus on the fact that a main goal and a main point is building trust. And what we need is building trust between science and society. And most of the people that just don't understand how science works. And in my position of physician, I can tell you that people trust in us as physicians, in us as scientists, and they are looking forward. In comparison with politicians, the trust in scientists is incredibly higher. So what means trust in the society? It means that we really need an ethical and regulatory framework to allow the development of the technologies. This was done at a business-driven way at OECD, and the French Charter for Innovative Neurotechnologies, the European Charter for Innovative Technologies that I strongly encourage all of you to read. If you need it, it's on the EBC website, is promoting these values, promoting the fact that we need reliable data, scientifically grounded technology, but things that are done considering vulnerabilities, considering the various use, for example, for the kids or for the aging peoples, and the various contexts. And competitiveness could not be thought outside of the box of trust. And this is true for any field, because you were mentioning organoids, and in the field of, I was one of the leaders of a European project named Hybrida, where we were dealing with the ethical issues of organoids. When it comes to the central nervous system organoids, the complex organoids are raising ethical issues too, because when you are able to mimic a pain circuit or a nociceptive circuit that is misworded as a pain circuit, you are raising fears, because what are they doing in their small box? They are making mini brains? No, we are not making mini brains, we are making organoids. So it's also the responsibility of scientists to say exactly what they are doing and not to foster fears, but to foster confidence and trust within the society. So this is something very important, now developed also at the UNESCO level. It's a great chance and opportunity to be chair of the expert committees that drafted the recommendation of UNESCO that were adopted by the Intergovernmental Committee a couple of weeks ago, and most likely will be adopted by the General Assembly in November. So it will be another soft law, but very important guidance for the various fields. And then we also need to have this confidence between scientists. And I have also the great opportunity to be in the scientific advisory board of CSA Brain Health. And I know the call of 2026, but I will keep no.
You know, it's the content.
But we were. I can back Frederic that we were consulted many times, and we had to write several texts very short time, several times. We absolutely need in one field to consider ethics by design, as it's a basic of the European Commission, but with what we name now RAD, reflectivity, anticipation, and deliberation, because the field is moving so fast that ethics by design is not enough. We need to survey the technology all along of the development, because if you can see for the interface brain to voice, that last year it was wonderful, it was possible to have one sentence. And a couple of weeks ago, it was 10 milliseconds between the thought of the word and the pronunciation of the word. So you need a continuous analysis and survey to make this accessible to the people. Competitiveness will be also a main point of accessibility. What could it mean if the final treatment is 2 million, 3 million? It will not reach the target. We will need to think also. And finally, between scientists, for me, there is a kind of paradox. The neural data are not covered by GDPR as personal sensitive data. If they are brain, if they are health data, they could be. But if they are just collected in neurogaming or things like that, they are not. And on the other side, and I'm also the head of the Science and Society Committee of eBrains, it's terrible to share data between scientists. It's a mess. We really need to fight every day to make collaboration at the European level. So many regulations to share the data on in the framework of open science. So we really need to calibrate what regulation we need at what place. And once again, it's a matter of trust, because the society need to trust us, but the administration need also to trust us. So maybe through accreditation, through traceability, through other means, but we need to ease the sharing of data between the professions.
Okay, thank you, Hervé.
Thank you.
I suggest we pause there with the contributions to open the floor if there are any questions. So raise your hand if you'd like to contribute. Can you please introduce yourself?
Arthur Schreuder. I am from the Cooperative for Life Support Europe. We are the issues around the data. We solve that kind of problems. We are working 9 years on it, and we're now going to operate it. So this is what we do, and we make it the preparation from Web 3 to Web 4. The technology may be too technical, but what we try to achieve that we have the data quality for validation for interdisciplinarity on the data. It's very useful for brain research, and we are starting an incubator program to make it in quantum computing use cases, and also that you have to deposit the data. And how we can do that? We keep the data by the person. It's not in the institutions. Keep the data 100 years by the person. As we starting from the early days of the data collection, on your genes and your environment, bring it together, and you keep your whole life your data with you, because you need in brain also a lot of context. The context is only continued by the person. And how we do the data collection, we do it on fair data, findable, accessible, interpretable, and reusable, because data is very expensive. And we do that from in Leiden University. We started from the rare diseases, because one of the problems that we find there 9 years ago, if we have 4 people in the Netherlands and one is a lady, you can't anonymize that. So that is one of the things. If you build a really European infrastructure on European systems and European open source data to make it possible that we can work with scientists, citizens, and service providers on an ethical way. Because when we started, it was also the starting point of the GDPR. And we recognized what the issues was, also in trust. Trust is the whole thing what we see, what a lot of people don't want to work. If we find it very difficult to do that in government, so everybody has his own silo. If we don't, there's a lot of patient organizations are the motivator that we can draw through our development. So that is what we get, and that is why we do it in a cooperative way, to do it in Europe, like Draghi mentioned in his report.
Okay, thanks for that. And it's probably something we can then echo and expand on, maybe even offline or in a further meeting, because we will have a point on the European Charter. Suzanne.
So on the animal research front, we're of course struggling with the idea that we want to protect animal research, but actually I think we can take it several levels above that. We really ask a political level and the level of the Commission that we are valued. This is strengthened. We need animal and translational research to be strengthened in the EU, to be valued, to be prioritized, to be recognized for what it is. This is really important. I mean, I've been, seeing infiltrations of the Citizens' Initiative to ban animal research, infiltrating at many levels through my activities, looking at grant applications, at ethical applications. Life is getting harder for us, and this is not an emotional debate. We should be thinking strategically on the need for animal research and its continued support and value by the European Union, by the Commission, and has made a very high priority. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Suzanne. Kasia?
May I have a question, actually? Sure. Because very often we look to the like-minded partners in third countries. So I'm not an expert in the field, but I would love to hear from you.
You need to speak louder.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
People
Sorry, I hope you can hear me. I was saying that very often we look kind of further afield to the examples, especially in regulatory science, how other countries, but like-minded countries, deal with similar issues. So I was wondering how the animal research is handled in places like Canada, Australia or New Zealand, and how would you compare it with Europe?
Canada's really interesting. So the Canadians are having this rejection of America, essentially. So ERA, the European Animal Research Association, has now got 9 institutions in Canada who've joined in the last year, and they look to Europe now for kind of intellectual and practical guidance. And obviously, the European Union sells itself as having the highest animal welfare regulations in the world. So particularly in Canada, there's now an interest in further collaboration. And I think, the elephant in the room, or the orange elephant in the room, Trump, is going to have an impact on this, because, there's a lot happening in America at the moment. It's not clear if all the kind of pressure is to phase out animal research in certain areas. But there's clearly an issue there. And what is likely to happen is that, those who oppose animal research in Europe will see what's happening in America as a justification to kind of phase out. So I think it's important for the European Union to stress why we need to use animals research in the most highly regulated parts of the world.
Thank you, Kurt. Sabine, I don't know if you'd like to respond also as a way of conclusion, because we need to wrap up this panel and move on, unfortunately, already. But I don't know if there is anything else you wanted to add.
To this question,
Generally.
Well,
Either or.
put very simply, I want public support for animal research guided by an understanding that this is not a dirty business, but still a necessity to save lives.
Thank you. And similarly, Alice and then Hervé, maybe to expand or respond and as a way of conclusion. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up the panel already, and move on. But Alice, you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think in general, initiatives like this one, where we gathering together different perspectives on brain research and brain health agenda are fundamental. So we need really to, as it was said before, break the silos and trying to find collaboration that could also increase the trust that, as Hervé was saying, that the general public and individuals living with brain condition have towards science, towards neurotechnology that will definitely revolutionize the brain health area. And then I think, as we mentioned, harmonized regulation and implement the cross-border use and implementation of clinical trials or the use of neurotechnologies, and maybe considering having a kind of like federated GDPR compliance infrastructure where scientists can actually share data in a compliant way towards GDPR or other data binding EU regulations. And this could ensure transparency and also increase and make the research in brain health or brain research in general more rapid and more collaborative and developing more in a collaborative way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice. And Hervé?
I should say that in addition that ethical framework should be one of the arguments of the development and competitiveness of research in Europe, because we have other elephants in the room, and particularly China, to name them, with no problems of having farms of primates, thousands of them that are used by European researchers. And if we are not doing, ethics is also thinking about what is happening if we do something, but what is happening if we do not do something. And we're speaking of saving life, you were speaking of the health of our fellow citizens. So we clearly have to train all this population. We clearly have to inform of what we are doing, what we are not doing, and ethics should be a force, a strength for research, the quality of research, and also a strength for our competitiveness, because a label of ethically developed should fight against some other wild labels or no labels.
Well, thank you very much, Hervé. And actually, I think that the last concluding remarks are a perfect transition to our next panel to talk about a transition from excellence to clinical practice, where we are welcoming Professor Andreas Reif, who is the president-elect of ECNP, the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology. Thank you, Andreas, for being with us. And Alina, good morning. You are the project advisor at the ESMA, so the European Innovation Council and SME Executive Agency. And maybe I can give you the floor immediately to maybe explain to us what is the interesting acronym, what you're doing there, but also what are the bottlenecks, challenges that you see, and whether, you know, what we just discussed is reflected in. So over to you, Alina.
Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to be here and represent the European Innovation Council, and actually to represent the program managers, the AIC program managers in health, who are fighting next to you or also for you for the projects that we are, through projects that we are funding for brain research. And I will tell you about a specific challenge that we had in 2021 on brain diseases. And these AIC program managers are deeply engaged in driving innovation for neurodegenerative diseases, for brain health, and so on. So the AIC plays a unique role in the landscape of the European funding, especially in health, but many other areas as well. And I want to substantiate here that the AIC, and through what I will talk to you about, is that the AIC is not only a funding project, funding program, but is also an, let's say, an body for the body in the sense of a friend of the researchers to bring their valuable ideas, the innovative ideas to market. We are very much aware at the AIC of all these challenges, especially by through the work of the program managers in health. And what I want to highlight here is that the AIC complements what Kasia said about the funding programs by ERC, by Marie Curie, by the cluster on health, by adding the third pillar in the Horizon Europe for innovation, by really trying to deliver marketable products, or support researchers to on their path on the clinical side, and so on. There are two highlights, two aspects of the AIC that really fit into our thematic here, from excellence to practice. And I would highlight here first this specificity of the AIC on the breakthrough science, meaning that we are funding, we are not just funding incremental advances in health research. We are really funding breakthrough ideas, transformational ideas that are actually really driving the next therapeutic care for patients, even if this might be new next generation AI in mental health, or new approaches to neurodegenerative diseases, and so on. We have, and the second aspect that I want to substantiate is the path that we are following by supporting research. So we support research in health, or in brain, for example, from the lab until the clinical part, and to the market. How do we do this? We do this by having three important programs. We have AIC Pathfinder, who supports very low TRL science in general through consortiums, through consortia, and then AIC Transitions program, who is supporting higher TRL 5-6. We know that, and we are aware, and our program managers are fighting a lot to redefine, or to define TRL in health as being quite different than the TRL in other areas, particularly because of the clinical translation path that has to be funded. And while from the technical point of view, the technology might be ready for the market, from the clinical point of view, is not there. So the TRL for the health project is not reflected as in other areas like environment and other areas that we are funding. And we are very much aware of this, and we are trying to tackle this this particularity of the health sector. And the third, and maybe the most famous program that we have, is the accelerator, where we fund actually companies that are ready to tackle the market, to bring to the market, and we are supporting them through either granting, grants or equity from the AIB. So this complete journey from lab to clinic to the market is not just theoretical. It is fully supported and followed up by the AIC program managers, who are not just observers of the innovations, but they are stewards of the innovations. So the AIC program managers are always involved in proactive management of portfolios. They are shaping portfolios of projects. They are advising on the regulation part. They are working hard in bringing together projects, regulators, and IP strategists and IP advisors and the industry stakeholders at roundtables like this of discussions, or at just through common services, to offering the common services. In the field like brain research, where this scientific there is a lot of scientific excellence, but the translation is extremely difficult. In 2021, there was an what it is called AIC Pathfinder challenge in brain tools. It's called brain tools, and there we funded 9 projects who are coming together and trying to tackle different parts of brain research. Either this project are working in neurostimulation or in developing AI for mental health and so on. And we have one particular project that did the journey from being first just a FET open the legacy project of AIC is the FET open. And a consortium was brought from FET Open Seed funding, then a Pathfinder challenge under the Brain Tools. Now is funded as a smaller consortium, really dedicated to advance towards clinical research through transitions. And they are also trying to tackle the challenge of the clinical research, indeed, by having clinical validation and work on animals, on primates, because this is indeed what they are also saying, that this is what they need, and this is really useful for them. So for the time being, I'm open for questions, but this is in a nutshell what is AIC about, and what do we have for the health sector.
Thank you, Alina. Andreas, I'm tempted to immediately jump to you, because issues with translation in the brain field, it's obviously something that ECNP can definitely relate to. So over to you, and would like to hear your perspective.
Thanks a lot, Frederick, and thanks a lot for inviting me to this meeting. I'm speaking on behalf of ECNP, and our core mission is still mental disorders, although we have our borders to neurology as well. Our focus is mental disorders, and I'm also earning my money being a psychiatrist, so I will focus on mental disorders in the next few minutes or so. So as you know, mental disorders are highly prevalent disorders and impose a huge burden on society. And I think what we have to stress is that this comes early in life. Most of mental disorders come before the 25th birthday, and they strike between the 20th and 50th year of life. So when you set your foundations for your professional life, and this means they have profound impact on productivity, on level of functioning, and also on your long-term outcomes. So when we speak about mental disorders, we speak about the future, not the past. I think Romana has alluded to that. When we want to build a resilient society, think about the future of the European Union, we have to deal with mental disorders. They are the largest and most important impacting disorders when it comes to productivity and functional level. On the other hand, we have had a lot of progress in basic neuroscience. A lot has been done, a lot has been funded. Enormous efforts have been made also by the European Union. We've talked about the European Brain Project and other issues. So many euros have been spent there. But despite the fact that mental disorders are so prevalent, despite the fact that we have invested a lot in basic neuroscience, we still have not yet seen real true progress in the diagnostics and therapy of mental disorders in the last decades, actually. So why is that the case? First, I think we are still left behind when it comes to translational clinical studies. Here we still see a disproportion between the prevalence of mental disorders and other fields of medicine. We would need to increase the amount of research funding for clinical translational studies by a factor of at least 10 to come up to other fields of medicine, such as cardiovascular medicine or oncology, which we are lobbying for since long, but which is actually not taking place. But the full truth is also that we need new concepts in it. We're still stuck with a 50-year-old diagnostic system, which has not really changed. We all know this is atheoretical. We all know it's not based on biology. And all experts actually acknowledge that we need to have testable biological mechanisms for mental health that will be completely and radically different to current diagnostic systems. So we need a change here. We're still stuck with the old system. And that has also effects on clinical trials, pharmacological trials, but also other fields of intervention. And the failure to see new treatments is actually the outcome of a failed diagnostic system. So we need new thinking here. And that is at the heart of ECNP's precision psychiatry roadmap that assumes that we will have biological mechanisms that can be testable, that will cut across current diagnostic systems, that we can develop a diagnostic framework different to the current one that brings the best treatment at the right time to the right patient. But that really needs new thinking, both from basic research. We can't have a mouse model for depression if there's no depression, right? And this kind of circular logic has generated a lot of meaningless findings. But we also need to appreciate that in clinical studies by the industry, and we need to be this appreciated by the policymakers and regulators also. And also we need to generate new outcomes, and that even affects health technology assessment bodies that still kind of discriminate against mental disorders because we choose the wrong outcomes. So mental health research needs to have new foundations, and that affects all levels of research. This is a decade-long mission as well, but it's well worth it, because only hereby we will truly innovate research and clinical practice.
But this precision psychiatry roadmap can definitely be seen as a landmark in, let's say, making this global ecosystem change perspective. What do you expect from the EU, from institutions, from the European Commission or the Parliament? And where do you see that this is helping generate new innovation?
Well, we being ECNP would hope that the EU adopts this kind of view as well and goes beyond these classical diagnostic system, but focuses on mechanism-based research, clearly with a translational angle. So I think whenever we fund mental health research, we should have translation already in mind very early on, and not being something that is at the very end of our research projects. And I'm really, I cannot ever read this last sentence in the grant proposal. This will lead to new therapies. Then show me the new therapy. Show me how you want to do that. Where's your translational promise that you have in your research project? And this should not just be a vague promise. It should be the core of new research, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I see there are some reactions in the room where colleagues can relate to this. Any questions to our speakers and panelists? Any comments? No.
I think we should also not forget basic research. Especially if you think about.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Sorry. My name is Martin Fuhrmann from the German Center of Neurodegenerative Diseases. It's an institute of the Helmholtz Institution, and I'm a researcher there. So I think we should also not forget basic research, especially if you think about the COVID crisis. There are basic research that had been done before was crucial for development excellence. That's my point to that.
No, absolutely. It's very clear we must not forget about basic research, but it needs to be informed by what we think are clinical guiding principles. And I think we need better communication here between basic research and clinical researchers. I still see there's only very little understanding, often even within one department. Clinical people do not talk to basic research people, and then very interesting ideas pop up, because if all you know about mental disorders, for instance, comes from a textbook, if you have never seen a patient, and if this textbook is outdated as such, then basic research can only take you so far. And I think here we need to align basic research better with clinical needs and clinical ideas. But yeah, absolutely, I could not more agree, and I do basic research myself. We must not forget about that.
So we'll take 3 questions, Tom, Ioannis, and Hervé. We take them one after the other, and then we'll ask you for.
Just my name is Tomek Williams, University of Helsinki and Fenskali Network of Excellence. I want to echo my colleague's point there that a lot of the things that we're most excited about in translation were never innovated with patients in mind. We think about genome editing. Nobody was thinking of translation at that point. So I strongly echo your point in the room. The same goes for iPS cells, the same goes for so many things, and I don't think we can lose sight of this. So thank you.
Ioannis?
I think we have a great chance. Since 2023, the European Union has put priority the mental health and well-being promotion on different fronts. And I think, agreeing with both of you, we cannot separate it. I think it's not really helpful. We have to see it as a platform, as a pipeline of research that now has to go forward, because mental health, and now politics start realizing, and EU hopefully will realize more and convince them in different committees that what we're talking about affects productivity on a daily basis, affects science, affects health, and living of quality of life of people. And we need to have it as a pipeline from basic to translational. But this is the time for mental health to jump in and try to convince that it is priority, not because other diseases are not correct or are not important, but this has a transversal effect of the society, from productivity, susceptibility to health and quality of life. And this starts, as you said, from really early up to the age, really old age.
Hervé, and then we hear from you, Alina, and Andres.
Just once more insist on defragmentation, because once more we are hearing about fundamental research, which is obviously needed, clinical research, real life data we absolutely miss for mental disorders, but also for neurological disorders. Multiple sclerosis is affecting so many young people. So we absolutely need all of this, and we need, and this is hopefully what we will do within CSA Brain Health, we need to gather all this data on a holistic point of view, including early diagnosis, as including in precision medicine treatment. So we do not oppose one against the other. And translation is also from the people, from the patients to the bench, to the lab, and the other way. So do not oppose, work together, combine.
I would like to indeed second my colleague Andreas on the fact that indeed we are valuing a lot, and there is a lot of excellent science, basic excellent science in brain research, and there is a lot. And ERC supports this through the funding, and there is the space there to do this. But researchers indeed have to understand that they have to think from the seed of their research. I want this to reach the market. I want this to reach the patient. If we want, we have to do research also with this in mind, because otherwise none can help. The Commission cannot help only with some money fragmented from here to here. We are in this scenario. Data is not properly collected if we do not make the research with this in mind. Then regulation. We will the people that are developing actually the next step of the basic research, they are facing this, that when they go to the level of, okay, now I have to see where do I fit with the EMA, with the MDR, with the medical devices regulation and so on. Actually, I haven't taken into consideration in the first step this. So the research is back steps. So even the basic research has to be made consciously with the mind, I want this one day to reach the patient. So I fully agree that in the grant application, this should be a much more responsible sentence. This will be the next treatment, because it's a long way to be the next treatment. Thank you.
Andres, you want to? Yeah.
I think
and as a way of conclusion,
well,
because we need.
We should not play basic science against clinical science.
Yes.
That's absolutely not helpful. And we need definitely both ends. But as I've said, the translation needs to go both ways, and we need better understanding what's going on. And you can do basic science just for the sake of basic science. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we need to do a bit more to tackle the challenges that come along with mental health.
Very quickly, just a comment. There would be, of course, no TRL level 7 if we didn't start at TRL level 1. And I'm afraid increasingly we're seeing less emphasis on lower TRL levels for research advancement.
Okay. So I see that we have topics for discussion. Sabine, very briefly.
For all of this to happen, there needs to be a framework, where from the beginning, the basic scientists to the clinical scientists to the patients have the time and space and the framework to work together to really make it happen and to not just talk about it.
Suzanne, it's another demonstration. We need a new consensus paper for the priorities of brain research on behalf of EBC. So that's homework we can definitely put on our list. So we are now, as I said, under a schedule that we need to respect. So I'm eager to move forward, but also continuously invite you to carry on these discussions after the meeting, not only today, but in the future. And the consensus paper definitely can be a vehicle for that. And I'd like to open our next panel on the future orientations to promote research excellence in the European Union. And our pleasure to welcome 4 panelists with Katja Jozak from the Commission again, as anticipated. But also Jan Palmowski, who is the Secretary General of the Guild of European Research Intensive Universities. Jan, thank you for being here. Azayek Middleman, who is Director of Strategic Fundraising at the EIT Health Accelerator. Thanks for being with us this morning. And Thomas Ryan. Thomas, you're an EBC board member, but you are also the chair of the FENS Advocacy Committee. FENS standing for the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies. Jan, I'll probably start with you, with your perspectives and your views on the main gaps in the current landscape, and in particular for brain research on behalf of your organization. So over to you.
So Frederick, we represent 23 comprehensive universities. Most of them have big medical schools and faculties. I'll keep my powder dry for later, but we've just had a meeting of our deans, and I think a lot of what's been said here will be echoed by them. And they were discussing this, and I think the 3 big issues that were really mentioned, so just to re-emphasize them, is really around bringing together better sort of basic and clinical research, so problem-oriented research. I think that's what really close to their hearts. It's around the disciplinary integration or interdisciplinary integration, where also as universities we see that we can provide real added value. And then the third issue really is around regulation. And I think that's an issue of ethics, but I think it's also really an issue of competitiveness. Our best researchers, they have plenty of opportunities to do their research outside the EU, where the regulatory environment is much friendlier.
That's really crisp, and definitely points we can come back to. Samas, I'd like to invite you to share maybe a few perspectives before we open the discussion. Over to you.
Okay, well, I'm a neuroscientist, and that means I don't know how the brain works. No one in this room knows how the brain works. No one outside this room knows how the brain works. This makes neuroscience different from every area of biology, and this is a problem. And the reason that we can't have meaningful translational research is we don't know how the organ of the brain normally functions. But I think I can be optimistic and say that we as neuroscientists are at a turning point First of all, the new tools that have become available in the past 20 years have facilitated fundamental discoveries that were unimaginable even when I was an undergraduate student. And second, the intersection of neuroscience and AI research is already transforming how we do research, but hopefully neuroscience will lead to the next revolution in AI, because true AI is going to have to be based on how the brain works. Now, the problem is that in Europe, we are not supporting basic discovery neuroscience research. We've heard a lot of talk about frameworks, about infrastructure, and that's all positive and that's all necessary. But if we don't have basic investment in research, nothing is going to change. And that means funding for discovery neuroscience research. Currently, we're in third place. Europe is in third place in terms of contribution relative to GDP for investment in basic research. China surpassed us in 2020, and since 2020, China has been investing more as a proportion of GDP in the European Union on average, and almost every EU member state. Only 6 EU member states invest more than China in research. It's Denmark, Finland, Austria, Germany, Belgium, and I think you can also add Switzerland and the UK, of course, so 7 or 8 countries. Everyone else is investing less than China. We don't see an increase in research output also in Europe based on quality or based on quantity. The US is producing far of the most research output in neuroscience across the world, and China is steadily increasing. Since 2018, we've seen a near exponential growth in research output in neuroscience, but biomedical research in general from China. We do not see any increase in research productivity from Europe since the 1990s. Okay, so what can we do about it? We need to increase investment. And the instrument for that, the primary instrument for that we have in Europe is FP10. I don't think we've heard FP10 being mentioned yet today, which is the next version of the Horizon Framework Program, and specifically the ERC, right? Only FP10 and the European Research Council have the magnitude of budget to change how we're approaching brain research, both fundamental and translational in Europe. And the reason for this is that you need to have flagship programs that cover all of biomedical sciences. In the United States, the reason neuroscience is so successful is because of the National Institute of Health, which funds all of biomedical research, but it gives 1/3 of its budget to neuroscience because that's the priority. So overall, the US spends in taxpayer funding between $15 and $20 billion per year on brain research. In Europe, nobody knows, but it's probably somewhere between 1 and 2 billion euro. That's including member states and federal funding from the European Commission. So this needs to change. And we at the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies, we represent 22,000 active research neuroscientists across Europe, fully support the Draghi report and the HITA report. And in collaboration with other colleagues, including in the League of European Research Universities and other organizations, strongly believe that FP10 needs to have the budget doubled to the zone of 230 million euro, and that the European Research Council budget needs to be doubled at least, and ring-fenced for excellent research, for discovery-based research, and also for applied research. And I think it's important to say that we've heard some discussion today between the tension or balance between basic and translational research. And I think when you look at it from the US perspective, that conversation doesn't happen as much because it doesn't need to happen as much. I was a part of research that discovered that lost memories are still present in the brain, that when we forget in Alzheimer's or in traumatic brain injury or other types of amnesia, the memories are actually surviving in the brain, they're just not expressed. We didn't really know this until 2015. The reason we were able to do this was because of optogenetics, which was based on science that was done on single-cell algae that were found at the base of the Nile River in Egypt. And that research that was done on algae led to optogenetics, led to us looking for lost memories. And we weren't doing this with clinical outcomes in mind. We were doing this because we thought it was important to advance how we understood scientific theory. And I think the real tension that we have in Europe is really between what I would call competitive research and incremental research. And when I'm advocating for research in Ireland, I tell politicians and I tell civil servants, I don't think we should have a priority on either. We should probably just be funding the best researchers that we have, because science is fundamentally about competitiveness. And the reason the US has invested so much in research is not with a focus on any given disease or outcome. It's because they understood that being a successful country was predicated at being at the frontier of key emerging technologies, whether that's mRNA vaccines, artificial intelligence, the internet, we can go on. And so when we're thinking about how we're prioritizing research, bottom-up excellence, whether it's basic or applied, is what's going to lead to the best outcomes. But this is going to require a radical increase in investment from the European Commission. Otherwise, Europe will continue to be third place in science going forward.
Thank you, Tom. As I'd like to turn to you, reflecting on what you heard, but primarily on behalf of the EIT Health Accelerator, and maybe you can say in a couple of words what it is exactly and what you are doing, and we are looking forward to your perspective.
Thanks for the invitation to be here. I really appreciate it. So as Frederic said, I'm Isaac. I direct the EIT Health Accelerator. Our mission, funded under the third pillar of the Horizon Europe Framework Agreement, is to precisely support the translation of innovation from basic and clinical research to the market and ultimately patients, to create a living, breathing, successful, job-creating and narrative-building European innovation ecosystem in health and life sciences across all different verticals, all different indication areas, but of course with certain priorities and thematics. And the mental health, neurodegenerative space is one of our key focus areas in that, because of the size of the unmet patient need and the importance of the topic and the quality of the raw building blocks of European fundamental research, clinical research, and industry players that enable the neuro and mental health space to be a success for the European ecosystem of innovation at large. I'd like to comment on something that Thomas just said with an analogy, if you will. I'm a big fan of analogies. And I think in this debate around the importance of basic versus, and I agree that that is a problem if that is the perspective of clinical research. The way we see it is that the quality of the fundamental research, its pertinence. I used to work in the agri-tech sector before working in health, so I'll make a food analogy. This is about the quality of what we would call in agri-tech inputs. You need seeds that are the right seeds, that are high quality, that are able to germinate. You then, though, also need fertile land in which those seeds can germinate. If you are throwing out good seed to shallow soil or impoverished soil, even if the seed is good, you will not get a good crop. And if you are only looking at the quality of the soil, meaning the market appetite, the unmet patient needs, and so on and so forth, but you are planting old seeds, you will not get good germination in the end. So we need not a versus approach, but a collaborative approach, where we are at the same time investing. And investing means, of course, financial means, but it also means a key word that I haven't heard yet here today, which is something that we focus on, and that is skills and appetite and interest in this sector from young talent, so that we are nudging people to choose careers in this space in particular. That's true for life sciences, health in general, but it's true, very manifested in the neuro and mental health space. We need the quality there of collaborative research that marries what we are learning from clinical practice with what the wondrous experience of basic scientific independent reflection and human intelligence thrown at a challenge can produce. But then we also need what EIT Health focuses on mostly in our activities, not duplicating with the ERC funds, and that is the soil, to go back to my analogy, that these seeds can grow in. What we know is that what is needed there is a marriage of what industry players, what private investors, what payers, what health insurers, what regulatory bodies are looking for. We need to understand their perspectives on risk, because who says innovation and discovery is also talking about the risk of failure and the cost of that risk in a resource scarce environment, which we all remember from basic economics, is any environment you are allocating resources and focus areas. If that soil is not fertile, if those actors are not speaking the same language, if they are not meeting and functioning together, building collaborative projects, those seeds will not germinate and they will not produce a great crop. I'll finish with my agri-tech analogy there, but I think it's a good one, or at least it helps me organize my thoughts. So concretely speaking, how do we do this at EIT Health? We start, as I said, with the skills topic. How do we make sure that we are training fundamental science researchers, but also healthcare practitioners, doctors, and critically underinvested nurses and nursing support care to have the skills to innovate themselves, to understand what the unmet clinical need looks like in their work. We then run large-scale collaborative projects. I've picked one as an example today called the Brain and Mind Consortium, which was funded something like 135 million euros, I believe, largely by the France 2030 program or initiative in France, gathering together French stakeholders and others in order to work between industry and fundamental research to identify technologies and innovations sitting in the lab, and then imagine and build together how can we get these out of the lab walls and into the innovation ecosystem. Many of those become startups. And of course, I run an accelerator, so I'm biased towards startups, but I am not saying that the necessary development pathway for every piece of technology has to be a startup or an SME. There are corporate R&D programs, there are joint venture initiatives between industry and hospitals, for example, that can also push innovation to the market. So while startups are often the vehicle, the widget, if you will, that carries innovation from the promise to the patient, it's not the only vehicle by which innovation can be pushed and clinical practice can be improved. We also talked a little bit about data, and I tie in here the European Health Data Space Initiative that EIT Health is very deeply involved in. When we talk about European Health Data Space, what's first and front of mind is often patient data. You know, a citizen, as I have, moving to new countries around Europe and wanting the data to follow, that's great. But it's also about the data that is necessary to empower fundamental research, to enable longitudinal studies over multi-decades, for example, that are particularly key. As an example, in the neurodegenerative space, where sometimes it would be amazing to be able to go back 30 years and determine biomarkers 30 years ago that indicate a diagnosis or that indicate a disease that evolves later in life. The final part here that I just want to pick up on is, as a European, it can sometimes be a challenge already to work with ourselves as European countries. But if we are really playing our strength and our key card here in the brain and neuro space, we should, I think, have even greater ambitions than simply working amongst ourselves. And that is, we should envision an ability for the European innovation ecosystem with the private sector that we work a lot with and public sector players, creating for Europe a global connecting platform where innovation can, and fellowships and fundamental research and startups and the entire ecosystem can interact, co-fund in a public-private partnership model and push innovations to the market for patients. There are other like-minded global economies that are thinking along the same lines. Someone mentioned Canada, that's very true. Japan, Korea, other ecosystems as well, that are facing the same challenges that we are in many ways, and that also believe, as we do, that health and healthcare is ultimately a public good, is part of the social contract between citizen and state, that is the foundation of health in Europe. That is a message we need to fight for on a global level. And that is a message that if we are able to utilize what we already have in Europe together, of working with each other, even though we look and sound different, come from different perspectives, can pull in global capital and global collaboration to push solutions to the market and to patients. Those could be European originating solutions, but they could also be solutions originating elsewhere that could address European patient needs. So let's not just dream of working better with one another. let's dream of using the 70 years of the European experiment to really position this ecosystem as a global leader, where entities that are like-minded can come together and co-build value for patients in areas of unmet need. And in all of those many needy areas, the neuro and mental health space carries particular advantages and particular narrative advantages, especially, that I think can help bring in that attention. So I would like to see that in the FP10 model, is Europe taking ownership of that space and really leading on a global level. Thank you.
Well, we can only say that we love this idea, and we are biased as EBC, as we are now leading the global collaboration and international collaboration work package within the upcoming partnership. So this is definitely an idea that we can put in the activities. But of course, for that, we will need political support and potentially also a bit of funding. So I'm now turning to you, Kasia. Thanks for committing to being with us today, but we'd like to hear from the Commission perspectives, what are, let's say, the vision for the future orientations, and you can probably also already pick up on some of the points that were, I would say, thrown on our table today.
Okay, super. Let me try to build on the excellent contributions from this panel and preceding speakers. Okay, money. It's about the big pot of money and how you divide it, and then how you use it and leverage it, right? I think those would be the main points on the money. On the big pot, as you said, Thomas, we as investors in research from the Commission side and jointly with the member states lag behind some of our global competitors, but there is a consistent effort to make a point with the capitals, with the member states from Ireland to France, Germany, my home country, Poland, to push this investment to the level of 3% and above it, right? So for those Brussels aficionados in the European semester process, in the governance process, all the countries almost in the EU got a recommendation on the necessity to increase their national investment in research, because it's the combined pots, the European pot and the national pots. And my dream would be that those national pots not only fund national research, but also cross-border research, which especially in the health field, in clinical field, is not very often the case. When we want to fund multi-country clinical trials, which is an issue that is dear to my heart, and in the part of the Commission that I come from, we see very often obstacles to that. So on the pot, on the division of the pot, we will have a proposal, the multi-annual financial framework, on the 16th of July. And as I said, there is not much that we can share and it's publicly available, but we know that there will be a competitiveness fund, including the next framework program. You ask me what it means, I can tell you I know nothing. My expectation is that there will be a health and biotech window there, which is good news for everybody in the life science and you in neuroscience specifically. And my expectation will be that there will be much more attention on this continuum, right? How do we go from basic research? And I think ERC is, as well as EIC, are seen as jewels in the crown. And how do we make that connection between the two, right? Because there is a lot of funding, but sometimes we also wonder, do we follow up on the successful projects? Where is this funding continuum? And to the point that Isaac made about the ecosystem and supporting the innovators, very often spin-offs from academic projects, spin-offs from the projects that we funded via IHI, the Innovative Health Initiatives. How can we ensure that there is public, but also private and charitable, or let's say philanthropic funding brought together? And for me, that would also be one of the tenets for the next framework program, right? There is the public budget, but that public budget has to be used, public from the EU and national pocket, has to be used to leverage private funding, investors, right? We come back to the question of risk and trust, right? We work with grants, so we fund, and whatever at the end, we are happy that we have funded it. But we have to also change this kind of risk appetite and the way we found an account for that investment, that the failure is part of the learning process there as well. In terms of the policy framework, the life science strategy that will be adopted next week, so 2nd of July, it will be covering health sector, but also environment and agriculture. So more scope there. But it will look a lot about. It will broadly address the need for some regulatory changes. where DG Sante, for example, leads on areas such as clinical trials regulations, the ethical approvals, all these issues. And there is a plan to have a biotech act that would address some of those regulatory hurdles that you have mentioned, and that should come within the mandate of this commission. From my side, from the research and innovation side, it's also important that when you talk about addressing fragmentation, we not only talk about regulatory fragmentation, but also fragmentation for research infrastructures. And I not only speak about the kind of the ERICs and the EDICs, those that are formally established, but data sharing that you mentioned, the funding, okay, that's also part of the infrastructure. Where my team is focused their attention on is really the clinical trials infrastructure, right? So if somebody has a good idea and want to run a trial, how can they do it in Europe? Who are the right actors to talk to? Where's the information? Who knows the ecosystem in a particular field? And you were talking about trials that probably where are we good at it in Europe, right? Okay, so we lost ground in clinical trials to increasingly to China. US has always been in the lead, but we have analyzed the data from CITES, our register of clinical trials, and there was one surprise for us. So we can guess who leads, which discipline, which leads the clinical trials. It's the oncology clinical trials, right? But the second one are the diseases of the central nervous system. That surprised me. I was not aware of that. It's really a second. I think it's around 15%, but maybe my colleagues remember exactly. Of the volume of clinical trials with oncology, around 30, but there is the promise, right? So then the question is, okay, we have a pipeline. Colleagues in EIT are identifying it. Can we look at how would we best invest into that's translational research and clinical research? Not forgetting, as what you're saying about the foundational research, and I think ERC nobody questions the importance of funding and scaling up that. Voilà. Was there something else? I can give this very quick update I wanted to add.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of other points,
but we finish. Yes.
Yeah, no, but it's one step in our dialogue. But maybe I can invite you, Jan, because we haven't heard much from you with your introductory words. How do you reflect on what you just heard? And there was one point raised by Suzanne in her introduction, which was the notion of predictability, which we are now also trying to, or sensing from this panel, looking to the future. So how do you relate to this?
Thank you. So first of all, I mean, I think it's really important to reflect on where we are right now, not just looking ahead, but also looking back. And so I think the US has already been mentioned. I think it's worth noting that with all the cuts that Trump is making, the US is still spending more on R&I than we are in Europe. But we are seeing a fundamental shift in international global collaborations because the US is putting out. And so I think that really reinforces the point about global, that we really need to think in global terms and should just, I fully echo that. And I think it's great, Fredrik, you mentioned this point about international collaboration in brain health, and I would really encourage you to think about that and think about the place that Europe can have so that we can think about competitiveness, not just in terms of who can we attract, but actually really with whom can we collaborate in a way that nobody else does. The second point, I think it's really important, again, to think about the brain health partnership that we've just seen the publication of the midterm evaluation of Horizon Europe, which doesn't really tell us a huge amount about partnerships and how they work and how they succeed. And so there's a lot of move in the Commission at the high political level that we need to really simplify. We need to look at which partnerships work and which don't. That's not going to be easy with the information that we have. And so I would really encourage you as you begin this work in earnest to really think about evidencing and communicating straight off, because I think it is just so important for the sustainability and for the longevity of what you're about to do, the important work that you're about to really launch in earnest. Then on FP10, fully endorse what we've seen, but I am very, very worried as I'm sure you will guess, by the Competitiveness Fund. To my mind, that's a flagrant contradiction of what von der Leyen has said, but that's beyond your and my pay grade. But I do think what I worry about is precisely, we've talked a lot about the connectivity between fundamental research or problem-oriented research across the entire research pipelines. And I'm extremely worried that the focus in the Competitiveness Fund of agility, which means you can shift money from one place to the next, from 1 year to the next, that the focus on competitiveness, on high TRN research will only increase, and that we will really, and because one of the things surely that I think also you're trying to address is that we need to collaborate across the piece in fundamental research or in low TRL research, and that has huge value and huge value add in Europe. And I do think that is something we really need to nourish and nurture, because we have this capacity that nobody else has. And on the global aspect, we can start immediately. There's the Africa Initiative. We can really strengthen that, for instance, in health research. And that's really hard because we've got EDCTP, and outside EDCTP, not much is happening. So I think that there's a lot to think about, but I do think thinking about how IHI, EDCTPs, two fantastic partnerships that work really well, thinking about what makes them strong, and really, you're clearly doing all of that, and I really encourage you to continue to do that. I think this is really promising, but there's a lot for us as a sector, I think, to think about and to grapple with. Thank you.
We are now nearing and almost at 11, so I'll invite maybe panelists for words of conclusion in, let's say, 30 to 60 seconds maximum. Jan, we just heard from you, but do you have anything to add as a completing words? Thomas?
For advancing brain research in Europe, we need to think of this as an integrated competitiveness, security, resilience, well-being issue. It's not just about health, it's about having a competitive society. This is true, I think, of all of biomedical research, and specifically neuroscience. And I think that to give context, everything that we're doing here, everything this community is doing is positive and good. It's just that we're not doing enough of it. And the reason we're not doing enough of it is simply we don't have enough basic investment. It worries me that that message doesn't get through enough to policymakers, and the perspective of what is actually necessary to take Europe to the next level is not being seen. And I think that this is a message that we need to have coherently as a community, whether we're focusing on infrastructure, data management, clinical trials. We need to be constantly delivering the message that basic research funding in general needs to be radically increased, and animal research needs to be allowed. Those are the two challenges that pervade everything we do.
Just to piggyback a little bit on some of the funding questions, I think one of the topics or one of the sources of funding that comes up more and more, Cassia mentioned one is philanthropic funding, pulling philanthropic funding in a centralized way into this space. The other one, which comes up a lot and which we are engaged in exchanges with the EIB and others, is the role of pension funds and pension funding. There is a narrative element to that makes sense, of course. Pension funds chip in later in life, right, to support our old age and our care, etc. And so having pension funding flow to help support the basic research, but also that research translation makes sense. It's a story that can be told to voters, to citizens in a logical way. And ultimately, of course, health improvement in the neurospace affects healthy outcomes, not just life expectancy, but high quality life expectancy for patients and for citizens. So I think thinking outside of the box in terms of how we can aggregate different funding sources in the public and the private to flow them then back to the fundamental research, but also its translation and the support of early stage startups and SMEs is a key way to have a money multiplier effect on the pure public budgets of NP10. I don't think there's a panacea, there never is, but I think we do need to be willing to think about these alternative funding sources, pooling them together and allocating fairly to create this pathway.
Thank you.
Actually, 20 seconds. I think on ERA, we haven't mentioned ERA a lot, and I think thinking about the regulatory aspect, I do think there could be a real opportunity. We've just missed the window until 27, but to prepare addressing this together between RTD, DG Santa to really try and think about the regulatory aspects in an era context. We're doing that enough for animal research. Why not do it for regulation? Thank you.
Yasha?
So
You
we
to-
have 2 minutes. I give
No,
you
no,
back
no,
to
that's
Suzanne.
fine. That's fine.
No?
You have your right to do 30 to 60 seconds if you'd like. So anything you'd like to add to what was said?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So
So
Suzanne,
conflicts-
over to you then for the very easy mission to summarize everything that we've heard over the last 2 hours.
Yeah, I have a whole page of notes, but don't worry, I'm not going to read them. Sincere thanks to everybody, and of course to our MEP for inviting us here today. I mean, with over 600 brain disorders, you know, the brain is a special place and needs some special attention, and we do need to increase recognition and support. We've heard a lot of the challenges and problems, and we've discussed solutions. We're talking about a consensus paper, maybe we could think about that. That would be as also to accompany a consensus paper. I think I was thinking that, you know, this issue of EU becoming a global leader in brain research, which I think we're all on the same table here and agree that we have the skills, we have the, you know, the great soil, and we have the seeds, and we're in a fantastic place in brain research. And you know, we hear these phrases recently in the news. You know, let's make something great again. Let's make brain research great again. It is great. Okay, brain research in Europe is in a great place. Let's make it even better. And I just end with our campaign and remind you there is no health without brain health. And thank you all for being here and for your participation today. Thank you.
So just a last word about keeping. We don't know yet the evidence of coffee intake on brain health, but there is coffee outside of the room. You're all welcome to stay with us. And a particular thanks to Andrea, the assistant of Romana Yakovic for